let's talk about one of my favorite topics of why I know within my heart, within my soul, within my gut, I just know that the property market is not going to crash. So here's some data to back this up and also some logical analysis. Now, for some background, my job, I was trained as a business analyst for 3 years by one of the world's top 10 business analysts globally. And my job, when he was teaching me, was to step back and look at the bigger picture. So that's what I'm going to cover off today, as well as actual data. So let's get into it. Before I do, I want to actually highlight a couple of different things. I just want to let you know that when it comes to what's the definition of a crash, all right, let's get into that a little bit more. Just to let you know, when the world was ending during COVID and everyone was like, oh my God, the world's going to end, it didn't crash. I don't know if you know this, but property market wasn't really impacted during COVID, right, in terms of its capital growth. I remember having debates with my friends who were property people in the mortgage center at the big 4 banks. I had 3 debates with 3 friends who were pretty high up in the mortgage section at banks. And I was the only one saying to them, it's not going to crash, just wait. We'll all get propped up. And they were like, it's got a doom and gloom, it's still going to crash, I'm scared. I'm like, okay, we'll just watch, give it 6 to 12 months, I'm telling you now it's not. And I was right. But anyway, point of this is nothing big or catastrophic happened during 2020, okay? Number 2, the next thing I want to talk about is for those of you who believe in the same sort of belief system that I have about the 2030 agenda. That used to be 2021 agenda, the 2030 agenda. And that agenda is that, they are saying, the Matrix are saying that you will own nothing and you will be happy with it. I think that is true. How I believe that they're going to go about that though, I don't believe that they're going to take away something we already have. I believe what they're going to do, because this is the trajectory and where I'm seeing things go and what they're physically implementing on the ground, I believe that they are just going to make it harder for you to own certain things, such aka house and land, right? Because if they wanted it to be easier, they would. But they want to make sure it's stretching a little bit hard, but at the same time, they want to make sure it doesn't collapse. And I'll get to that point in a moment. So the 2030 agenda of control and you not owning anything and you being a minion and being happy with it and all of that stuff, I believe that's going to come true. Absolutely. Where I focus my energy though is making money. And right now, the only thing that I can see that is the best place to make money, fact, is real estate. The first place really where you get rich is business, but most people don't know how to build a business and it is a lot more challenging. And so the next best thing is real estate for sure in Australia. So let's have a look at why. So number 1, we have our population growth is expected to go from 7.9 billion to 9.7 billion soon. I'm going to come back to this in a minute as to why this is relevant. Number 2, we've had in Australia during 2022 to 2024, we had over 2,000 construction companies go down, aka go down, either file for bankruptcy or go into administration. So did you even know that there was 2,000 construction companies? There's more than that, obviously, but that's just what went down, either filed for bankruptcy or went into administration. So I've got another whole entire video on that. That has been the big changing point as to why we have the worst housing shortage crisis in 2024. So if you want to watch that, I've fully broken that down on a separate video. So here is an updated news article from 20th of September 2023 from last year. So this was obviously last year. Between July 2022 to April, 1,700 construction companies across the country entered administration, right? Now, up until, that was obviously only up until April, and then up until the end of 2023, there's about another 300 companies that collapsed. Now, don't forget, a lot of those people have the brains and the smarts in order to know how to build property, right? Who have the licenses to do it, the building licenses. Then what happens with those guys? They can't open up companies again and have a license to run once they've already collapsed and gone into admin for at least the next 7 years. So there's going to be a large proportion of these guys who can't come back. Now, yes, in the world of business, there'll be ways that some of them will be able to make a comeback. Some of them will, be burnt. Others will be like, well, I legally can't. Others will just start working for other companies, employees or contractors and stuff like that. Or some of them might even set up companies under their mum's name or under their partner's name, stuff like that happens every day. So there'll be a few that'll probably come back, but right now it also doesn't make sense for a lot of them to come back because of the holding costs either. So we'll come back to that. The reason why this is important to know is because of the dwellings that we're short by. Actually, I've got just a basic supply versus demand here as well. So we have Australia's worst housing shortage in history. It's so bad. We cannot make a comeback from it, even if they'll to completely turn off migration. A lot of people think that migration is a thing keeping it propped up. That's not the biggest thing right now. The biggest reasons why we've got a housing shortage is because of the construction companies going down, which is actually just due to inflation. Okay? So that's important to know. These construction companies aren't coming back. What happens if they don't come back? We don't have enough dwellings. What happens if we don't have enough dwellings? Well, purely we've just got a supply versus demand problem. So we've got heaps of people in Australia who want a roof over their head. What happens if they don't have a roof? Well, the value of prices become more valuable, right? So they go up. Right? Now, on to point number 5. We have, in Australia, we are the number 1 country in the world for the most amount of net millionaires moving to Australia. So we're the second highest migrating country in the world, but we're the first country in the world with the most amount of net millionaires. That came out from an ATO data report a couple of years ago, about two or 3 years ago. So what happens when they come here? Well, they need a roof over their head. Then they start to bring their friends and family and they need a roof over their head and they're like, hey, no, we're living in Australia now. How good is it? With an Aussie accent. And then what happens? Also, their money comes with them that stimulizes the rest of Australia and the economy. Right? So you can't forget that it goes directly to housing, is stimulus. Housing is directly impacted by migration. So we've also got the land releasing approvals that are at all-time low. So when councils need to release and say, yes, okay, you can officially open up this land and you can legally build on it, it's the lowest it's ever been in 17 years. That's pretty sad. So even if we have building companies who are like, yeah, I want to build on some land, I'm ready to go, there's not much land for them to open up that is ready for them to build on from a council level. All right, to number 6, the average politician, what did I put there? To make decisions. That doesn't make sense. Anyway, the average politician in Australia personally owns 3.1 investments themselves. So what does that mean? If you think about it, when politicians are making decisions, they're going to think, how is that going to affect my own property portfolio? So there's something in it for them to win or something for them to lose should the market crash as well. So you've got to think about who controls it. You've got to think about who here loses if it all crashes. A lot of people lose, not just you and I, but a lot of people will lose. The people who already own the real estate will lose. And they don't want it to crash on their dime either. So the next, and this is literally the most important one. Out of all fucking, I don't know how many points are here, 20 points, number 8 is the number 1 reason why it's not going to crash. The RBA keeps printing money to prop it up artificially. They're propping up the system in general. So if you don't know much about inflation, again, I have a separate video on that, on how that helps prop up real estate. But I'm going to give you the high-level version today. When they print money, and real money at which they're printing it is 12%. It's not what the market, when the news tell us CPI is 2 to 3%. That is CPI, which is true. CPI is not real inflation. CPI is them measuring how much our things are going up by, right? It's not actually measuring the amount of money they physically printed and they put into the Australian economy. That measurement is called the M2 or M3 money supply. So the CPI is one measurement which excludes a lot of shit such as petrol, housing, and fresh produce. But real inflation, which is how much the RBA prints, is actually 12%, which means where does that money go when it goes, when they print it? Again, it goes directly into the fucking things we need every day, right? It goes into things such as petrol. It goes into things such as the roof over our head. It goes into things such as food, right? So it directly impacts real estate and it directly props it up. This is the reason why real estate really truly had what we call an inflation hype during 2021. Because typically when they print money, They printed $1.1 trillion in 2020. Then what happens is 12 months, it usually has like a 12-month lag where it starts to like impact. And then there's this 12-month window after that. So for us, it started 2021 to about the end of 2021. You have like this short-term richness where you're like, fuck yeah, I feel fucking rich, right? It's because they just printed money and have extra. Then that's when the bad storm comes. That's when the fucking wake-up moment happens, which happened in 2022. And what happens is during that period, all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I am really poor because all of these things that I had heaps of money given to me artificially, but all of a sudden I'm now coughing up more for the things that I need to buy. So if you have assets, aka a house, that can benefit from it in two ways. One, the value of the houses just go up. So you didn't have to do anything smart and simply just own an asset before 2020. And if you happen to buy before 2021, you were just very lucky because the houses artificially got propped up. Now they go through this big printing cycle, believe it or not, every 7 to 10 years. True fact. However, I believe it's going to happen more frequently every 5 to 7 years now. And also, each time that they print, they have to print more than the time they did last time. And so the reason why the big printing cycle in 2020 that made us feel really rich and propped up houses in 2021, the reason why it felt so big was because they had to print a shitload more than the time they did before that. And the time when they did that, before that, was in 2009, just before just during the GFC in Australia. You know how we skipped it in 2029, like what happened over in America, and it didn't really affect us in Australia? It's because they printed money. And it caused a bit of inflation. But the amount that we had to print this time is more. And then the next time is going to be more. And the next time is going to be more. That's why I'm really scared of inflation. If I'm going to be honest with you, that's the biggest thing that I'm scared of. But you don't need to be scared of it if you have heaps of houses, because the value of the house gets propped up. And the second thing, in the second way it benefits, is then the rents then usually have a 12-month lag behind that, and rents then slowly get propped up as well. Usually that has another 12-month lag behind that. So we'll go back. So 2020, they printed the money. 2021, we felt short-term richness. 2022, we felt ultra poor if we didn't have assets going up. What was that, 2023? Yep. By 2024, your rents would have caught up by the end of 2024, actually. So for me, for example, all of my rents have now caught up based on my rates going up as well. So now I'm back to where I was pre all of this inflationary period of the interest rates going up, for example. So when the government print money, this is what we call the Keynesian monetary system. We've been in this system, or this way of money, we've been like this since 1971. That's when President Nixon took us off of the gold standard. And so if you want to know more about that, that's on another video. Let me know. I can share that with you. Okay, so to the next one. What have I got? What am I up to? Number 9. See, I just need talking points sometimes. Great. Stimulus packages, what I call stimmy packages. So whenever something is about to crash or it looks like it's fucking up, right? You know what the government do? Is just bring out a new stimulus package, just like they did in the early 90s. Did you know that that's when they brought out the stimulus package of childcare rebates? And they're like, well, we need to get the wife now going to work because we need a second household income to keep up. How do we get the wife to go to work? We'll give them an incentive and give them a rebate to send the kids to childcare. Great. That'll get them working. The stimulus package worked. And then every time they bring out a stimulus package, it's just meant to be short term. And then what happens is when it's short term, oh, no, now it's like a fucking we're on life support. We've got to keep it now. They can't remove it because we're dependent on it. Same thing happened in the early 2000s. And they started bringing out first homeowner grants, right? These grants didn't exist and they were meant to be short term. What do you know? Now they're here and physically it's like the main way that most Aussies get their foot in the door to buy their first one is thanks to the grants. And then in 2020, for example, now there's been a lot of grants. Just to let you know, they bring out new grants every 6 to 12 months. It's fucking wild. I don't even keep up with it anymore. But I'm just giving you kind of like the big ones or things that are kind of relatable that you would know of, right? Then in 2020, they brought out the building grants. I don't know if you remember this, but in 2020 when COVID was happening, they were like, oh my God, we need to get shit fucking building again. So what happened is they gave us a $20,000 fucking building grant. You didn't even have to be a new person. A first homeowner. You could have gotten the grant just by simply building something. It was wild, right? And there was like if you wanted to renovate grants, like wild, right? So they turn on these stimulus packages. It's like it was the last resort to be like, fuck, this looks like it's about to crash. Let's fucking give them something to turbo boost it. It's just a band-aid option. It's really bad. It's not good short term. It's good for those who own real estate, though. I can tell you that much right now. Because why? We benefit from it. Thank you. So, land density. There's only so much that you can make. So, and maybe you're thinking, well, we're in Australia. We have a fucking huge amount of land that's empty. There's only so much land that they will approve to be extended. The next thing to my next point is we can't spread out, right? Because we need a certain amount of land to make more food. And we obviously have more people migrating to Australia. So we need that land as well. So it is capped. Unlike, shares where you could just keep buying and keep adding in companies that can go to zero. And that's something else to remember, right? Shares is a business that can go to zero. Land does not go to zero. It's never happened. Does not happen. Isn't that a fun fact for you? Okay, so overall, we have a deficit of houses of 700,000 in Australia, and that is getting worse, and we cannot catch up to it. To my point, the next reason why is because we don't have enough materials to build in Australia, which also means inflated prices as well. So I have, again, the video that I have on the construction companies and why that all occurred. If you want to watch that, I go into the deeper as to around the materials that happened during between 2020, thanks to COVID and shutdowns, and we haven't been able to catch up either. And so we also have a massive shortage, which I actually haven't put on here, over in Perth especially, but it impacts a lot of WA and Queensland. We have an overall tradie shortage as well. So they're all wanting to go into the government projects, oils, trains, all of that sort of stuff as well. It's a lot more stable. Okay, next thing is we have a record household savings of 200 billion, believe it or not. And they're at the highest that they've ever been in 25 years. And that's a percentage of income. So that money is dead money that goes somewhere, right? We have household disposable income is at the highest it's ever been. Funnily enough, even though right now people are feeling tight. Well, isn't that a fun fact? We have the highest record government grants and stimulus packages wanting to be spent. So this is, again, coming back to my grants, where it's like we have heaps, but they're just sitting there dormant and no one's really utilizing them. Also, the government does a really shit job at advertising them as well. There's heaps of fucking grants inside super, but again, they don't really want you to know about it. So it's like, oh, look at what we launched. We kind of told you about it, but then no one finds out about it. Unemployment's the lowest it's ever been. This is probably the biggest thing for me as well. I'd probably say this is the second biggest thing outside of inflation. Institutional investors are moving from commercial to residential. So like Blackstone, which is the world's largest real estate investor, they're currently and have been planning for many years now to move from commercial investing to residential investing. So they give out a percentage of profit, right? The same thing was announced in Australia. The government officially gave the go-ahead in 2000 and I can't remember what year it was, 2021 or maybe it was 2022. They officially gave us the go-ahead to say, hey, superannuation companies, you're now allowed to invest in residential real estate in Australia as well. This is huge. Australian super is worth I'm pretty sure it's $4 trillion or $4.2 trillion. Actually, maybe $4.1 trillion is how big it is. When they start investing, now it takes years for this to happen, right? Because they've got to start building up packages and create different deals with building companies. And then at the start, and then all of a sudden the fucking building companies are going down left, right, and center. So those super companies will eventually start coming out, and they will, the same as what Blackstone have done, and they will start investing in residential real estate in Australia. I don't know when that's really going to start happening, but they've been given the go-ahead, and they requested it. Why did they request it? Because they see value in it. And so you've got to have a look at the bigger people, the people who are bigger than you and I, right? These people, they know something that we don't know. If they're wanting to say a $4 trillion industry is trying to push to have access to something, they have some fucking data as to what's going on over there, right? So if they're wanting to invest in residential, you can bet your dollar butts I do. All right. And to my overall, I've already mentioned this, the supply versus demand. It's just simple. When you have a huge supply and you have a really low demand, that is where something can be propped up and can be requested for more money. Fact. And I just don't foresee this going away in the short term. Definitely not over the next 10 years. People are also living a more loner lifestyle. So, for example, we've got a culture that is moving towards not wanting to go into a nursing home. I, as one, actually know about this. I was personally working in nursing homes when I was younger, and I was like, this industry's fucked. There's no way known that I'm going to be poor enough to end up in one of these. It's one of my motivators, probably one of my biggest motivators, actually. So we have these older people, they need houses, and so more programs are coming out to help support you stay living at home, but then you have the support inside your home to be able to look after you. And I anticipate things, like AI and robots and all of these sort of things coming out to help us, the millennials, in 20 years from now, when we start getting older and when we're reaching into our 60s and 70s and we need help around the house a little bit more, these sort of things are coming out. So it entices them to stay at their house, which means it holds onto physical land and it not being spread out, right? So they're holding on to it. And then inflation, I think I need to scrap this one because I've already mentioned it a few times. So inflation is at an all-time high, and it is the number one thing that props all of this up. So I also want to talk about something else, which I hadn't mentioned yet, which was in 2022 when the interest rates were going up. Everyone was anticipating for the real estate market to fucking crash. And I'm like, it's not going to crash. It can't. We've got such a big supply. And me and a very few sophisticated investors that I look up to, an economist, there wasn't very many people saying it's going to keep going up. And I was like, it is going to keep going up. So during the worst interest rate hike of our time, of recent times, since the 1980s, it was the worst huge interest rate hike that we had since the 1980s, when interest rates climbed all the way up from like 12% or something all the way up to like 17%. So the worst that property dropped was 5% in 2022. 5%. And of those properties, they were the $1 million properties in Sydney and Melbourne. So when you buy really high expensive properties, they have heaps of room to drop. So just don't buy them that high. So that's number one. Number two, it's a timing thing. So if you bought a property at, say, 2020, and nationally, I think in 2020, don't quote, I'm going to make up a number here because I actually can't remember. So let's just say, for example, in 2020, real estate, you bought a house at the start of 2020. It went up by 15%. The following year, it drops by 5%. It went up, don't forget, 15, but drops by 5. So you're still up 10%. And this is what a lot of people forget. They think, oh, fuck, I just bought a house, it's crashed. You know what? I'm going to give you a perfect example. Actually, I just had one of my friends who went and bought a house all out on his own. He bought a house in Bendigo in Victoria. Now, he didn't want to use me or my team's advice. He wanted to buy something locally that he could renovate. I was like, great. And then, surprise to my knowledge, a couple months later, he's like, Liv, I bought a house in Bendigo. I was like, oh, fuck, that's the worst area. But whatever, he did it. He's like, he didn't want to listen to my advice. So anyway, and this was at the start of 2023. I'm filming this now at the middle of 2024. And that particular area has had a huge nosedive. I think for that property, it's so far dropped about 12%. And now he's freaking out. He's like, Liv, what have I done? And I'm like, well, I told you not to buy there anyway. But regardless, let's move ahead. Let's forecast to the future. I said, it's a waiting game. I said, it will come back. But now you've bought it the worst kind of time. Now you're kind of taken 2 steps back, but it's okay. You will eventually make it 3 or 5 steps forward. You now just have to wait longer than the average person to get growth because of the location that you decided to buy in. So it will. It's a timing thing, right? I'll give you an example. Okay, let's use this as an example. So say, for example, me and my team, we buy here, right at the start of the explosive phase. Boom. Now let's just pretend for a moment, though, You bought here, which my friend bought here. Worst fucking timing, right? So he's going through this pain right now. But then what will happen is once you give it some time, it will come through the recovery phase and it will eventually have this dip. Then we buy there just before then. So you've just got to wait it out during this particular time. So if you were somebody who bought property at 500,000, it went up to 800,000. Okay, now it's 700,000. But you know what? It will eventually have its recovery time, and it's purely propped up by our inflationary monetary system, which is one big fucking Ponzi scheme. And it's a Ponzi scheme because they don't tell us about it, realistically. So let me know if there was anything that you've learned from this. I know this could be quite deep, but fundamentally, it's all one big Ponzi scheme that is being propped up, that even I am in it and I know it's being propped up. And so because it's being propped up by too many other things that are larger than me, and like think of it as like a ball, right? I'm gonna get a fucking ball, 2 seconds. Okay, so here is the Earth. Let's pretend that Earth for a moment is sitting on 100 prongs, right? That's keeping it held up, right? If only one of those things fell, it would still stand tall, right? That is what the Australian property market is like. There would have to be a numerous amount of things to all occur at the same time for it to all completely crash, which just won't happen in Australia because there's too many people that would benefit from it, or there's too many people who would suffer from it, and they just wouldn't let that happen. Because in Australia, we allow other countries to make the big mistakes, and then we don't do it. For example, when the American real estate industry did drop, or it did heavily go down in 2028, just due to bad banking, what did Australia do straight away? Oh, fuck, we better make sure that we don't make that mistake because we don't want it to happen here. Bang. And instantly they brought in all these new laws. Okay, now I'm going to leave you with one last thing. Let's just say I get it all wrong. And let's just say 10 years from now, it all fucking comes crashing down. Real estate goes to zero, as if that'll happen. Let's just say, let's play it out. Worst case scenario. Liv was wrong. I put all of my money into real estate. It all crashes. Guess what? At least I gave it a go. At least I did something about trying to build some wealth in the most safest thing that we have in Australia, in the world, especially in Australia, because real estate in Australia has the best capital growth opportunities than any other country in the world. So if all else fails and you're 30 years into your investing life, at least you made millions and millions of dollars in the meantime. So I can tell you right now, my property portfolio has already made a huge impact on my financial options in my life. It started making a big impact from about year 6 onwards. That's it. It enabled me to be able to leave my job because I was able to pull money from it for me to survive, leave my job and start a business. And I had no idea if I would make money for the first 6 to 12 months. It's like, can my property portfolio help me and keep me afloat? It sure as hell did, or else I wouldn't have been able to make that move. You know, for some people, their property portfolio can fund their big dream wedding. It can pay for their car, for the big family car to get by. Maybe it pays for an overseas trip. But it doesn't take 20, whilst yes, it takes 15 to 20 years for you to really retire and really live off it and have the dream, but it can start making an impact between year 5 to year 10 typically, during that 5-year window. First 5 years, don't touch it. So if all else fails, at least it benefited your life in some way. And at least you had a fucking shot at something that has a 99% chance of survival. So if this was any value to you, please let me know. Just comment one thing that you took away from this. And please make sure you hit subscribe because it helps me produce more free content like this.